Ready, set, go. Here we are at discussion 8, and it's on organization structure and how did that happen. Did you ever wonder why organizations are designed the way they are? Well, maybe we'll get to the bottom of it here pretty quick. What is an organization structure? Well, that's how a company's built. They can be centralized, decentralized. Think Ivy Tech. All of the big decisions or everything's managed out of Indianapolis, yet there are 14 regions that all depend on that type of structure. And Ivy Tech used to be decentralized, and meaning that is all of the major decisions that were made about a campus were made in that region, not in Indianapolis. So we've gone from a decentralized type organization to a very centralized organization, with most of the decision making being made in Indianapolis and spread out throughout the state. Their span of control, and that means how much influence does one leader have or one manager have. And I think probably the best way to describe that is think about a classroom and how many students are in a classroom. How much influence does one teacher have? You know, in a school like Purdue, you could have 300 people in a classroom in a lecture. In a school like Ivy Tech, our classroom only has 5. You know, we shoot for about 20, but that's what they talk about when span of control. How many people do you supervise as you look at it? The other one is vertical versus flat. How is the organization designed? Does it have a management top and then the information goes to the bottom? Is it in a pyramid type shape? That's a vertical organization. Or is it flat? And I guess probably a good way of looking at that would be Khan Academy. And Khan is video tutorials. And there's probably only about, oh my goodness, maybe 10, 20 people that work there. But there aren't a lot of layers of management. It's flat in its management. And there are probably other better examples of that. And then there's the departmentalized, and they can be organized by function, by product, by customer. Again, think college. Each department, each subject, each degree has its own department. If you go into organizations, into corporations, now you may find they may be organized by region, or they may be organized by a product. They could be organized by function, such as a marketing department, a production department, an office department, that type of thing. So several ways to organize a company and look at the structure, and those can all be intertwined together. So many different configurations. And an organization can be like a line management. This is mainly terminology, so bear with us. You need to learn the terminology. Line management, and that's usually a small business where the owner, and I guess you might call this a flat structure also, because there's usually just an owner, maybe a shift manager, some employees, but it's a fairly straight line to the management, and there's not a lot of layers that you have to go up to get to speak with the owner of the business. Line and staff management, school organization, where you're going to have, let's say, teachers are frontline, or supervisors are frontline, and then there is a staff that supports that group, and usually in that group you're going to have a hierarchy. And the other one is matrix style, which is a project-based organization, and basically what that is you'll have different departments, But to do a project, they'll pull people off of each department and put those people together in a project-based team. And when that project's done, then they'll go back to their original departments, and then they'll be pulled for other projects. And you could have a cross-functional self-management teams. And these are groups of workers who work together for very long-term time, say 3 and 4 years, or maybe for the entire time they're with the company. Whereas the matrix is more of a short-term project laid out. So the organizations can be this, and terminology that goes with all of this. Oh boy, terminology. Okay, we have networking, and networking is linking it all together and making sure that the communications is as clear as possible. You have transparency to other companies, providing real-time communication as the product develops. Sebastian, the gentleman he talked about that has the trucking firm, has these people call in hourly so that he knows and can inform his clients what's going on. That one might be an example of real time. Another example of real time is UPS. They can tell you where your product is at any time. It has its own tracking. That's real-time transparency. It shows exactly what's going on with the product. You can have a virtual organization that doesn't have a physical space. I've kind of worked in that environment when I was in the Northwest. I really didn't have an office. I worked out of my apartment and set things up, but I had a secretary or I had an administrative assistant who was at another location. So we didn't have a physical space, but we still existed as an entity. There's benchmarking, and that's a measure of a company's standard compared to the best practices of that industry. They've gotten together, the industry's gotten together and say, these are the best practices, how well do you measure up? Core competencies, functions that sustain the business. Let's look at Subaru. Subaru makes cars, that's its core function, but it doesn't make all the parts for those cars. It just assembles the car in most cases. So its core is assembling cars, whereas it's going to outsource a lot of that activity to make the sub-assemblies. So core competencies, what does the company really do? Digital natives, that's you. We're trying many companies are still trying to adapt to the digital natives because you move so quick and you're so adaptive. One that's kind of interesting for me that I experienced is I asked a student in accounting to write things down so they didn't have to keep flipping up and back on the screen, and they looked at me and they just said, oh, I'll take a picture of it with my phone. No, I knew you could do that. I was just so used to using a notepad that I didn't even think about that. So companies have to kind of adjust to digital natives. Restructuring, and that's not so prevalent right now. Right after 2008, everybody was restructuring. I think companies are still changing, but there's not this urgent need to restructure to save money, or at least not as much as there was. An inverted organization is where the workers, you just take that pyramid that has the CEO at the top and flip it around. And your workers are on top, and their decisions are what drives the product, rather than a CEO. It's sort of a bottom-up decision-making organization. And organizational culture is the overall chemistry that goes on inside of a company. What is its culture? And you've probably experienced the culture at maybe McDonald's, or the culture at Musel's, which is a little bit different than the culture at the shoe department. Each business has its own culture, and you have to be able to kind of feel that culture to know how to survive in it. And then, okay, so there was a whole lot of information. How did this all come about? And it all came from two developers in the early 1900s at the start of, when we started doing mass production, Henry Ford and his Model T, and we had assembly lines, and the concept of economy of scales came into play. And what that is when we can make a product, the more we make of that product, the cheaper that price gets. So that was that was a big change from what used to be, because the economy used to run off of agriculture, and everything was handmade and everything was unique. I think of going and buying a pair of shoes from a cobbler who made a pair of shoes specifically for your feet, rather than going into the shoe department and having 20,000 different pair of shoes for everybody's, a standard size. So this was a big switch, mass production. So first off was Henry Fayol, and he came up with, there's a unity of command, a hierarchy of authority that had to exist. There had to be a division of labor if we wanted to be able to do it cheaply or less expensive. The individual was not as prominent anymore. It was for the better good of everyone, so everybody became a little cog. Authority was very important. Things were pretty well centralized. Decisions came from the top down. There had to be a clear communication channel because of so many layers. At one time it was said Ford had 22 layers of management. So communications had to be good. There had to be order and there had to be equity in the system. Now, he laid the groundwork, and then along came Max Weber from Germany. He was very similar, but he added 4 more concepts. He said all jobs should have a description, and everybody who has that job should be able to do and complete that description. There should be written rules and decisions, guidelines, detailed records kept. Procedures should be consistent, and there should be regulations and policies. And then staffing and promotion. This was really kind of interesting. Staffing and promotion should be based on qualifications, not who you were, which is another big shift in how things were back in those times before. So both of the theories favored, and they kind of came together. And if you look at it, this is how manufacturing or many corporations are set up. Bureaucracy was needed, which is an organization with many layers of management, so decisions could be made logically, and there had to be a chain of command or an organizational chart with somebody in charge with other people and down just like a tree. So that's how all of this came about. These are all adaptations of these two gentlemen's theories. So we are going to be doing some really nice stuff in class today, so I think you'll enjoy what I have planned. So thanks for listening. I'll see you Monday. Have a great weekend.